Welcome to a Healing Peace podcast. My name is Kimir Baker. I am an overcomer, writer, speaker, and God enthusiast. I am fueled by helping women achieve their emotional healing so that they can live the abundant life God has for them. In this podcast series, we provide faith-based inspiration to mend from emotional hurt, along with tools and tips for emotional wellness. In your journey, as you apply these tools and tips, you will begin to live the transformed life that you always desired. In fact, you will possess a new you. Nice to have you back. Before we get started, I want to do a couple of shout outs. First, I don't know if you guys listened, but our new intro music is by the one and only Sir Wick. The man is talented and I love grooving to his beats. In fact, one song he had, I was like, I feel like I'm rapping. I can't keep myself settled. Anyways, you can find out more about his music at sirwickmusic.com. That's SIRWICK music.com. Second, I want to do a shout out to all of our listeners, new and old. For the old, I thank you for growing with us. For the new, I'm excited that you decided to continue your healing journeys with us. At A Healing Peace, we want to inspire and encourage you during your life experiences. Yes, ladies, we desire to renew and strengthen you. Lastly, I am so happy for all the wonderful feedback because Kimir Baker, as I do this podcast, sometimes I do not know if it's helpful. I try not just to randomly talk, to have a purpose at least. But because I cannot see you, I'm not always certain that I'm leaving a good impact, that this is actually helping. So those ladies who tagged me and stated, keep up the good work, has been soothing to my soul. The compliments inspire me to keep bringing you guys great content. Now, for the new folks to the podcast, what you may not know is that I like to do tools and tips. And these tools and tips usually come from the previous episodes. And I do not want to disappoint. We're going to keep up our tools and tips. Why? Because it helps you to grow and mature in your walk. And this episode is our tools and tips of our previous two episodes where I was interviewed by Keisha Simone. Yes, you heard more of my personal story and you heard the things that I put into practice to overcome the cray-cray that I experienced. So I would like to highlight those things. And I hope that in the highlight, it will inspire you to put some of these elements into practice in your own journey. Okay, let's get started. Tip number 1, self-care. I spoke briefly at the beginning of the interview about self-care. Self-care comes in many forms. Some of it may just be as simple as resting, taking care of your body, what you drink, what you eat, exercising. And as I say this, sometimes I forget to do this for myself. But as I'm inspiring to implement this continuously, I'm encourage you to do the same. But not only does self-care come in the form of our outward body experiences, but also in taking time for yourself to recover from life's ups and downs. Yes, your healing journey constitutes self-care. Number two, in your healing journey, it's necessary to establish healthy habits in dealing with our emotions. Why? Well, we don't want them to destroy us. It's so crucial to identify and seek additional support for those emotions that we may tend to stuff. You know, we're not meant to carry these burdens internally. Another tip is finding your worth. This is so key as you heal from emotional wounds. When we do not fully grasp or understand our worth, we allow others to tell us. And you know what? Usually, what people think pales in comparison to how God views you and how you were created. Also, when we don't know our worth, man, do we develop some toxic relationships. We end up getting in relationships that tell us what we're worth, and it's usually nowhere near the truth. Because this is a big topic and it packs so many pieces of our lives, we will continue to talk about this throughout the podcast series. And I'm also kind of excited for things that we have coming up that really talks about embracing our worth and embracing how God views us and how He created us. Another tip is knowing that God is with us despite our suffering. No matter what life tells us or what other people tell us, we were created in God's image. God is always with us and He always loves us. This is His message, His basis of the Christian faith, because in His Son is the epitome of love. Our next tip, which we always stress, and you probably like, who's the way in this? Well, we do have interviews, and in the interviews, they too stress this, and that is finding safe people. I know that most of us have experienced some kind of hurt, some kind of wounds from people, but despite those negative experiences, there are still some positive people who can support us as we heal. They provide the human reflection of God's love, mercy, and grace. Yes, ladies, find these safe people. At thehealingpeace.com, we have listed in our resources section Safe People by Cloud and Townsend. Please go to healingpeace.com and pick up a copy. All right, here's another tip. Journaling. An overcomer's tool is journaling. Journaling helps in so many ways. It allows us to bring clarity to our feelings and emotions. It helps us to articulate what is truly happening in our innermost being. Yes, all of that just from journaling. Okay, I'm still going. There was still good stuff in that interview. And in fact, in the interview, I spoke about my abuser. The interviewee, which is Keisha Simone, no, I was the interviewee, correction, and she was the interviewer. And she was surprised that I did not bash or speak harshly about the person. And initially, one may think, oh, you're in such denial and you must agree with what the person did. No, never. I would never say that. Not at once, not at all. So I want to take this moment to clarify my statements. Yes, abuse has long-term problems associated with it. It did for me, and thus we're here talking and growing and maturing together. And if you had similar experiences, I stress, and I mean I stress, that the person's behavior is never acceptable, condonable, or that it was your fault. Never. But what you hear in the interview is that through therapy and healing, I was able to no longer allow trauma to own my life. I exposed it so that I can live. Any abuse or poor treatment does not have the power or the right to tell you or me that I am not worth living or having a good life. So, ladies, the tip is simply expose the pain with the right people. I'm not talking about somebody you just randomly be on in the grocery store, which that did happen to me once. And I was like, whoa, this lady told me just a little bit too much information. And, and sometimes it's not even that best friend, but expose the pain to the people who have the tools to get you to the next level so that you can diminish the power that trauma produces. Yes, trauma should not dictate the rest of your life. Now, I've been talking for a while. If you haven't been paying attention, I've given you 7 tips already. Now, we on tip number 8. Yes, number 8. And number 8 is allowing God to transform your suffering into healing. To do this, find ways to make God accessible and tangible in your life. For me, it was digging deeper into His Word and believing what He says about me. I needed to reiterate what God says and not the minister who's trying to make me feel guilty. But I needed to know from God and understand why He tells me to stay away from certain things. And in those things, they're to keep me from having more pain and suffering, even though it may produce temporary comfort. But long term, it produces a reliance on something that is temporary and usually causes more harm. Which that kind of leads me into tip number 9, which is overcoming the fears that keep you trapped in the comfort that is causing more destruction. Instead, find safe and healthy habits. Now, ladies, we done made it to tip number 10. It's the last tip, which is do the work. Overcoming requires investing, consistency, and continually working the previous tools and tips that I just described. As I state this, some days will be good and some days will just be bad. It just be like terrible. And sometimes you might have a bad week. You might actually have a bad month. And as I make that statement, what comes to my mind is, and I'm pretty sure, hopefully, most of you guys have heard that statement, that Rome was not built overnight? Yes, taking back your life requires persistence and commitment to you. A commitment to a new you. I didn't stress the part, but yes, it's a commitment to a new you. Now, as I read the 10 tools and tips, you probably didn't realize that these past 2 episodes was loaded with them. These all came from the previous 2 episodes. And as I stated before, that throughout the series, we're going to revisit these awesome tools and tips. They are the fabric. They are the iron that keeps us on long-term transformation. Join us next week as we talk about more overcoming those fears and creating healthy habits. Why? I want us to be victorious in the things that we're doing and participating in for our healing journeys, for our self-care, for our inspiration, for our transformation. See you next time.